Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last Thursday, I spoke in this place and asked the Government to do everything within their power and influence, including tabling emergency legislation if necessary, to ensure this appalling employment transaction cannot be completed. And I agree with what was said opposite. Time is of the essence now. The gloves are off. I think it's very important that we take immediate steps. And it's with that in mind, I have a whole series of questions I want to put to the front bench around what we can do in the scope of redundancy procedure, wages, safety measures, government commercial bargaining power and our intent under Maritime 2050. So just starting with redundancy, a lot has been said already about the procedure, but the most important point for me is that under Section 193 of the Trade Union Labour Relations Consolidation Act 1992, employers who want to make more than 100 people redundant have a duty to notify the Business Secretary of their plans before giving notice to the workers, and the employer is also required to do so at least 45 days before their dismissals. A failure to comply, as the Secretary of State said, is a criminal liability. I read the Business Secretary's letter. He's given the company until 5 p.m. Tomorrow, Tuesday the 22nd of March, to respond before deciding whether to make a formal complaint to the prosecuting authority. Can I ask the Secretary of State, if the Business Secretary doesn't get that comfort by 5 p.m. tomorrow, will the Government immediately and formally issue criminal proceedings, which, as he says, carries an unlimited fine? Moving on to wages, and I pick up the reports from the RMT that the new crew will be paid £1.80 per hour. I understand that because P&O trades internationally and its ships aren't registered in the UK, it is not subject to UK employment law and the requirement to pay the minimum wage. The International Transport Federation and International Labour Organisation minimum recommended pay rate for an ordinary seaman is US $1.99 per hour. It cannot be right that these people are working between the UK and France, where the minimum wage in both countries is just short of £9, but they're being paid only £1.80. That's approximately 20% of what they really should be paid. So, question on that front. Are we bound by the ITF and ILO for rates of this type, or can we impose our own minimum wage on those routes which are quite clearly serving a domestic market and being crewed by those living here? And secondly, is there a difference between domestic routes that's been made, for example, between Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the minimum wage should apply as compared to European routes? If we cannot intervene on the ITF and ILO, should we make it a legal requirement that routes of the type operated by P&O ferries must be operated by ships registered in the UK if, in these circumstances, it may be much more straightforward to ensure that employment law and minimum wage rights are as those in the UK? If we do not act here, we risk other maritime companies following suit in order to compete, a race to the bottom. We must structure a way out of this to ensure employees of these type are paid the minimum wage. Moving on to the third point, safety, as has been made by the honourable member opposite, but he is my friend as well. Safety, this seems to be the biggest area where we could surely intervene with our agencies. There must be a question as to how using staff who are being paid £1.80 per hour can meet our strict maritime safety requirements. Employers must ensure that their ships have enough properly trained and certificated officers so that ships can operate safely at all times. Under the Merchant Shipping Regulations of 2015, P&O ferries must, and I quote, identify the skills and experience required to perform the functions. On the face of it, P&O ferries have just identified those with these skills and made them redundant. In making the assessment, the following must be considered: hours of work or rest, safety management, certification of seafarers and training of seafarers. Paragraph 8.5 of the Merchant Shipping Notice relates to all passenger and roll-on, roll-off ships, and it expressly mentions that they need to handle large numbers of passengers unfamiliar with the maritime environment, who must be taken into account in determining manning levels. Paragraph 11 states that if there are any changes in circumstances, companies will need to apply to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency for approval of a new safe manning document under the 2015 regulations. Ship owners must also inform the agency of any change in circumstances which are relevant to a safe manning document. The agency will then review the document's continuing validity or approve fresh proposals from the owner or operator. I did hear the Secretary of State on this point, but I'm going to chuck these questions into Hansard. Will the Government confirm if a notification of change has been submitted to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency? If so, how will the agency treat this change of seafarer workforce? And secondly, if a notification of change has not been submitted, will the agency demand it and spell out the sailing sanctions should one not be forthcoming? Will one of these sanctions be that P&O ferries cannot sail again until the agency have approved? And can I just ask the Secretary of State to make sure that the agency go in with their usual tough standards in ensuring every single nitpicking area is looked at in this regard, and I'm sure we'll get some action. Fourthly, government commercial bargaining. This is, of course, an entity which has claimed millions under furlough. We've been there before with British Airways. We know it can't be claimed back, but there's an ethical point behind here which the government must stand. If the government does have legal and commercial powers at its disposal, it must use them immediately and indicate that contracts will be terminated unless P&O ferries reverse this decision. So therefore, will the government commit to so doing, or if it feels it's legally stymied, can a legal summary be published and put in the library of this place explaining why the government is unable to act from a legal perspective? And finally, we come to Maritime 2050. By coincidence, the Transport Select Committee has launched an inquiry on just this thing. Key objective of Maritime 2050 is to grow our skills base and inspire young people to join maritime. This decision from P&O Ferries will contribute to neither of those two key aims. The document states, historically, the UK has grown much of its talent and has kept a nucleus of highly trained and highly respected personnel, giving the UK a leading edge in its maritime work, both at sea and at home. Madam Deputy Speaker, this decision from P&O goes completely against the Government's desire for Maritime 2050. All of these reasons are why we need to fight fire with fire. P&O ferries have disgraced themselves and their workforce and this place with what they've done. It's time that we responded and made sure that they reversed this decision.